And we are live. Hey, welcome and thanks for joining us tonight. I've got Eric Hunley with me. Thank you for coming over, Eric. How are you?
All right, how you doing, man?
Brilliant, brilliant. Better by the day. uh, Tender topic for tonight for so many people. In fact, since I've talked about this, it's the response I've had and how many people have been in touch with how it's affected them or people they know personally. It has been unbelievable. So we are going to talk about bullying in all its different forms. As not just being bullied as a child, but even adults and workplace bullying. We're gonna really push it as far as we can tonight, and more importantly, how to deal with it. So
Okay, and so let me see. It's a short show, right? You're going to say what
yeah,
you do is you go meet them in the playground. So,
hmm
and there will be some Clint Eastwood music playing
as always.
with the whistling background,
hmm
and the little bully kid's going to walk up. It's going to draw back, and he's going to pop him in the nose. That's it, right? Show over.
But well, no.
Oh, okay.
So for physical bullying, yeah, and to be honest with you, I mean, again, I've had a little look at all the kind of advice out there, and there is some bad advice. There really is. So hi everybody, thanks for joining us. I'm just seeing one or two of the names saying hi. I don't want them to think I'm ignoring them, but the usual regulars, thanks for coming. Yeah, there is some really awful advice out there. So I'm going to try and help everybody out the way I helped somebody out a few years. In fact, I've helped a few people out with a particular method that's worked countless times. So we're going to see if we can do the same tonight.
Well, cool. Now, another question I had, because I know we talked about it ahead of time, is are you going to cover cyberbullying? Because I feel like cyberbullying is universal and it's not limited to children.
Oh, definitely.
I'm in my 50s and I can be bullied, or anybody can be bullied on the internet, and it's very pervasive, troubling problem.
Oh, definitely, yeah. In fact, I've had similar things myself, and of course, it's one of those things where, unlike a standard situation where if you're in a classroom setting or a work setting, you can walk away from it. This is very, very different with cyberbullying because it's somebody that you can't get to. You can't, they're publicly impacting your life, and it's really, really difficult to deal with. But we'll definitely address and talk about that tonight. So I've got to ask Eric, because I mean I know obviously you've spent a bit of time in the army. Was it a major issue over there in the military setting, or was it something that was just part of life?
Not when I not was not that I saw specifically in the military. I had, my own bullies, especially like junior high. My own particular incident with the bully was kind of your own nightmare, because essentially I had a bully who lended me a Walkman. And this guy was kind of a thug. I think he was about 2 or 3 years older, but in the same grade. And just, a complete brute. Had a really horrible time. And he lent me the Walkman, and it was like a generic Walkman, not a name brand. But anyway, my dad found out about it. My dad whipped my butt and said, "Give that back. You're not allowed to have it." The guy wouldn't allow me to give it back to him. And so we went to this tussle, and finally he took it back. But it didn't matter. He was still making me pay for it. So that's where my lunch money went for about 8 months. Standard bully, affair. But it really sucks being caught in the middle of, your parent at home, your bully at school. And I'm sure that many people had that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Fortunately, I had the growth spurt, and I'm a little hard-headed. So I kind of was able to skate out sideways eventually. But it can just be an absolute nightmare.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. In fact, the psychological impact that it has is absolutely dreadful, and it, the stress on the body constantly causing the kind of over. I'm trying to think of the word, but the too much cortisol basically, and the long term damage it can do can be absolutely awful, and the more it goes on, the more isolated and the more distant that the and I'm going to use the word victim because that's what they are, but the victim becomes, because of the fact that they the longer it continues, they feel like they've got less and less options.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
and I think that is really the nightmare aspect of it, especially the different forms of bullying. And by the way, there's another one I want to throw in there too called cry bullying,
Mm.
because there are those who actually use a quasi victimhood to bully
Hmm.
others. So
Yeah.
we need to cover all ends,
Oh,
and I know
definitely.
people are going to be pushing that back. So let's roll. I mean, we've been teasing it. Let's not bury the lead. Get us going, man.
Okay then. So the biggest thing here, and this is, I've got to address this, is the fact that the verbal abuse is usually the biggest factor. It's the highest rate of bullying that there is, and even if physical bullying comes later on, and it's usually a smaller percent, it always starts with the verbal abuse first. It gets reported more than anything, and the tactic that a lot of kind of board of governors and schools and their approach, they're looking at it from the angle of, well, if we don't know about it, what can we do about it? And they're looking at it from their angle of, well, tell the teacher, we can deal with it. And that's all well and good, but when little Johnny's at the bus stop, that doesn't help him. When he's on his own and there's nobody around, and that doesn't help him. And a lot of the time, if you reverse it from the victim's point of view and the bully's point of view, and just narrow it down to those two people, then generally it comes down to a simple cause and effect. The bully is doing what he's doing because he gets a reaction. And he gets that reaction, and because he gets that reaction, whether it's to make him look more popular, whether it's to get a rise, whatever it is, whatever the gain in it is from him, as long as he's getting that reaction, it won't get any better. It's going to improve. And I remember this with, I'm not going to say who it is because I don't want to embarrass him, but he was at school having a really, really hard time, and he came to me and he said, "What do I do?" And there was nothing physical going on. And I said, the thing is, you're giving them the power. You're the one giving it away. I said, and what I mean by that is, if they're calling you a name and it's affecting you, and they see it's affecting you, then basically you've got to, you're passing the power. Whereas if you turn it around, and I'll give him some techniques on doing it. I said, right, don't tell your mom, but I'm giving you full permission to swear and full permission to kind of say whatever you want. I said, insult me as hard as you can. And he was only young at the time, and he had a few poor attempts. And I said, no, really, really go for it. And he said a couple of what would be considered hurtful lines to most people. And what I did is I just expanded on it, on what he said. So he said something like, "Oh, your mom's a whore." And I turned around and said, "Well, yeah, she's got to pay for my dad's drug habit somehow." And of course, he looked at me. He was like, "That's not what I was expecting." I said, "Exactly." And that's not what they'll expect either. And once you've taken that power away from them, you're not going to get hurt by it. In fact, you're going to turn it into a joke. You've essentially disarmed them. And it sounds counterintuitive, but basically, ride the insult, go with it, add to it, make it humorous, turn it into something funny, and take that power back from them. Don't give them the power to let them trigger you. And by doing that, you will effectively get to the point where they will actually give up. They'll be like, "Yeah, I've tried this a few times now. It's not having the desired effect," and they will move on. And I've given this advice to several people, and it's worked. It's worked several times.
Okay, I definitely can see that, and I know that's definitely valuable. But what about those who are not good at flipping a phrase? For example, they're going to take an insult, and I'm not trying to say they're dumb. They're just not clever. It's just not that it's not in their tool book. What would be something that they can do to have a similar effect or whatever? Because it sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, like the goal is, well, these two cops told me one time, we don't stop crime, we just move it.
Yeah.
And you're kind of doing that with the bully, right? You're not actually stopping the bully. You're just getting the bully to lose interest in you and move on to somebody else. So what if you're not, clever or witty, naturally, and what do you do then when they're insulting you verbally? What would be an
Right.
answer?
So, and this does kind of go over to the physical side of it as well.
Mhm.
And this is something, and I've given this approach to a couple of people who've gone through physical bullying. Admittedly, these have been slightly older students in kind of high school kind of scenario. And I've said, look, call them over, or even get one of their peers to call them over. It's even better if you can get a peer to call them over and say, dude, you are making yourself look weak. Look at me. I'm small. I'm not somebody who's very sharp like you are, and you're going for me, and people are starting to see that you're picking on the weakest link. And and make them aware of it, and that is something that can be excessively powerful. More so if it's coming from a peer. In fact, it's
Hmm.
been proven that when a peer steps in, that bullying is 57% more likely to stop than if anybody else tries to intervene.
How could you go about? Okay, so that sounds to me like maybe there's a methodology to recruit one of
Hmm.
their peers or their friends. So how could somebody who feels like a victim, obviously talking to the bully can be a
Yeah, that
little
in
bit
itself.
overwhelming. Okay, yeah, it's like, hey,
Yeah.
well, by the way, you look kind of weak and stupid. Look at me. But how how would you go about maybe
So
approaching a friend? You ask him directly, like, are you
I
okay with this?
I would, yeah, I'd kind of, yeah, I'd call them aside and just say, look, have you seen what's going on? Have you seen what's happening? Are you consciously okay to stand by and watch this go on? If you can help me, it'd be really appreciated, and just appeal to their better nature. And again, if this is friends of the bully directly, then you're looking at something that is going to be sometimes equally as hard to approach as the bully themselves. It all depends on the situation. This is going to come down to the assessment of the individual. If you can't, then even better is a neutral third party. From somebody else from in the within, say, the classroom, who is it's not going to be expected. Even better if it's a female talking to a male, where you can turn around and say, "Look, can you do me a favor? Can you have a word with him and just explain to him that what he's doing is making him look weak in front. He's going for the easy target, and that in itself, it kind of makes that bully very conscientious of the fact that he's being watched, he's being observed, his actions are being seen, and if they're being seen by somebody who's just come out of nowhere and pointed out the fact that they're picking on the weakest link, that in itself makes him hyper vigilant to the fact that everybody's watching him and what he's doing. And a lot of the time this dynamic is down to the bully wanting to give a show of power, whether it's physical power or whether it's mental power or whether it's just having the upper hand of being able to push somebody around. And of course, if they're being observed and are aware of the fact that they're being observed, seen as going for the easiest possible target that there is, that in itself will make them go, I need to stop this.
Okay, what about the traditional answer you touched on a little bit, but telling the teacher. Is this
Right.
good or bad, and why is it good or bad?
Right. So there's two arguments with this, and it really is pretty much 50-50 according to the national statistics here in the UK as well as in the USA, in Canada, and most of the other parts of the Western world. If it's reported and dealt with, 50% of the time it has a great impact and it's stopped. The other 50% of the time it gets 3 times worse.
Okay, so
And that's where the
let's
problem is.
dig into that a little bit,
Mhm,
because it sounds like then there are nuance, because
mhm,
it's saying you report to the teacher responds.
mhm.
If it works half the time and makes it worse half of the time, because we have people here who could be teachers or parents or whatever, and I consider a parent and a teacher in a similar role.
Mhm.
When we're talking about kids, especially,
Yeah.
what is it that a teacher will do that is effective versus ineffective and making things worse?
Right. So this side of it, I haven't studied too much into, purely because of the fact that I don't think it's the most effective route. If something's 50-50, I would rather look at something that's going to be more effective. However, it's interesting you bring up the parents versus teachers. There is a better kind of scenario there with a household, unlike in your situation where your dad was 50% of the problem. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, in the standard household, if the person being bullied can go to their parents or their guardians and work with them, that is more effective than going to the teacher directly. Because a lot of the time, it's if the student goes to the teacher tries to deal with it in house. The parents don't even know about it. By the time the parents do know about it,
Which parents, by the way,
oh,
the
yeah,
victim's parents or the bully's parents? Because the
both,
both are
yeah.
factors.
Yeah, both sets. And I mean, I remember having a problem living up in Scotland the once, and I had to go. My stepson was at I think it was junior school. He was having issues with somebody at school, and I had to go around. I put him in the car, put my wife in the car, and we drove around to this house, and I banged on the door to say, look, your kid is bullying my stepson here. And as it happens, they knew nothing about it. And we went into the house and we resolved it, and we sorted it out, and it was all friendly, and they actually became very good friends after that. So, and that was a great instance of success. But you've also got, like I said, that really bad flip side of when it exacerbates things, and that's when the major issue comes to play. So working with your parents has proven to be a lot more effective than working with your teachers. Even if your parents approach the teachers, it's a lot better than you running doing that telltale thing where you're going to get pointed out and given the old snitches get stitches kind of talk.
Well, absolutely. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like personally reporting to a teacher or authority is much like people getting a restraining order and winding up dead in 2 days.
Yeah, exactly. And that can happen. And this is why I say it is a 50-50 mix. And this is where once it gets worse, then not only does the problem, as in the physical problem of the bullying, get worse, but also the mental effects and the psychological effects on the victim, because of the fact that you've now got, they feel they've got no options. Whereas prior to going to the teacher, they think, well, I can always run to the teacher if it gets too bad. I can run to help. I've got a rock to run to. Once that kind of lifeline is gone, and you go, hang on, I've been to the teacher, and now it's got so much worse. And now who do I go to? Because there isn't anybody. That's when it kind of, in my mind, it creates that real big mental block for the victim, because they now feel like they've got nowhere to go to. Hence, depression rates, substance abuse, all sorts of physical ailments, and in worst case scenarios, suicide. And this is something that has happened.
No, just Gavin, we don't use that word on YouTube.
We don't. No, sorry.
No,
my bad.
For your channel and future monetization possibilities, the S word is not. No, I'm not kidding you.
No,
do
I know.
Use that word. You could say topping. You could say maybe other things, but do not use that word for your sake.
Okay. Right. I'll make sure that one stays out the vocabulary from now on. Have you been watching the comments? Because there's probably been a couple of questions come up, and I've probably missed them. Can you see them?
I've been glancing, but I haven't gone deep into it. But it did remind me, and I wanted to circle back a little bit. And I'm almost digging back to what I said before about what do you recommend the kid does if they're not verbally quick on the tongue or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Someone wrote into my locals, because I put it out to get some questions about having an autistic child. Now, what would you recommend for somebody who may not feel socially as ready, or they're not normative, if you will? How do you approach that? And also, they themselves may not be able to do that. Is that where the parents have to try to come in and figure something out, or what's
definitely
the answer?
in that instance? So going back to the first one real quickly, where you said about the people who may not be able to put a spin on things as quickly, you don't have to be sharp with witty remarks. It can just be a case of, yeah, you're funny. Yeah, you're funny. Yeah, just literally.
That all you got?
Yeah, it's like, keep it coming. It's like, yeah, and literally kind of let them see that it's having zero effect. The more effect they think it's having, the more they're going to do it. So if they're giving you verbal attacks, and you're like, come on, bro. If you can, you don't even have to do, like I say, go overboard with it. Just go, all right, this is getting a bit boring now.
Is this similar to the gray rock method with the narcissists,
Possibly, yeah,
where you
yeah,
just don't give anything,
yeah.
and they
Just
kind of have to move on
force it
because
out of you. Yeah,
you're sort of you just sort of boring?
yeah. Basically, it's your grey rock, grey man, grey. You know, your scenario where you are that much of a norm that they're like, it's not worth the effort. I'm going to go and find somebody else who's easier to get a rise out of, and that's what it's down to at the end of the day. It's down now. Revisiting also very quickly about when you said about passing the kind of or moving the problem, a bit like what you said, what the law enforcement do. We don't stop trying, we move it. This is something where after it's come to an end, maybe then it might be worth letting the teachers be aware of it and that it's happened and that you've neutralized it and it's no longer affecting you, but you're letting them know because it will more than likely go on to somebody else. At that point, that's a completely different dynamic to telling the teacher, I'm being bullied. You know,
On that teacher note,
Mhm.
is it possibly more effective? And some of this falls on the teacher, in my opinion, that if a teacher knows about it, they can't let on how they do, so they can accidentally discover it. So if they catch it or and in action or stop it, there it's less likely to be blamed on the victim that the teacher knows. Or am
Yeah.
I wrong?
No, yeah, that is actually the perfect setup. If you are at the point where you think, you know what, I've got to tell the teacher, which, like I say, can work and it can be effective. 50% of the time, it is. So you know, it's reasonable odds. Try and work it in a way. So if it's like hypothetically, it's 3 o'clock, the bell goes, and it happens between walking from the school door to the school gate, for example. And this is the same thing every day. You go through this routine because people are creatures of habit, and that's when you're kind of getting pulled aside and getting picked on, or whatever the case may be. That's when you turn around and you say to the teacher, look, I'm going to go out at 3 o'clock, the bell's going to ring, and I'm going to step out the side door, and but before I've got to the gate, they would have jumped me. If you can then step in and discover it, then you know that'd save me a lot of aggravation for looking rather than looking like a snitch. So yeah, that is the perfect. You've got to set it up a little bit like a police sting, as it were.
You know what? K1 Wanna Fate, K1 Fate. I don't know. Anyway, K1 Fate in the chat, and I don't know how to say it. It's very recent. What if the bully is the teacher? And I've had that actually.
Me too.
What do you recommend then? Because you're trapped. I mean, that's the ultimate trap.
Yeah, definitely tell the parents. No two ways about it. I went to a school in the Midlands. My teacher. I'm going to avoid saying names of the school and the teacher and everything else, but he had his favourites, and they were always the little girls, and he didn't like certain boys in the class, and I was definitely bottom of the list when it came to the ones who didn't like who wasn't liked, and yeah, he was always the one. We're not just talking. I mean, I had everything from humiliation to the point where you know he was whacking me over the head with a big old Bible or dictionary or whatever it was. I can't remember. So and again, in that instance, you know, you this is where you're going to have to rely on your parents. If you can't go to your parents for whatever reason, and I know there are people out there that can't, then go to the headmaster, go to somebody in authority, go to the year head, go to somebody in authority, and make it as official as you possibly can. And if that still doesn't stop, and you have to on your own accord, call the police. It is still a crime.
Okay, and that was my next question. Is that, you know, what sometimes people cannot find the recourse to find someone, but then let's go on the flip side of what if you are the authority figure and someone comes to you with this problem? How do you, as the authority figure, handle it?
Right. This is something that is so delicate because you've got so many. So with the likes of the school, I'm not sure what the laws are over there in the States. I'm not even 100% sure what they are here in the UK. But I think kind of from the school gate, there's not really too much that the school themselves can do, even though it's a legal matter, and the school is still responsible to a degree because it's a school student. and children kind of, they're aware of this, and they will do this where it's kind of, they will wait for you at the bus stop, they'll wait for you at the bike shed, they'll and which will lead us into cyberbullying as well. Funnily enough, this is where you've got a massive problem, because unlike school, where eventually you get to go home, or you eventually get to go to hopefully a safe space, cyberbullying is a constant. It's there, you know.
Okay, I want to get to that. Please put a pin on it, and don't forget that, because I have other questions about cyberbullying that we all hopefully can get handles. Ziggy had a question. I've been told a few times. I'm trying to find exactly where it is, but apparently there's a bully that's messing with funeral arrangements or with the death of a friend, and I'm hoping, Ziggy, if you could rewrite the question, it would help a lot. I can't. I'm seeing little pieces of it, but I don't quite understand this. So let me actually finish that first one. So we're going right into cyberbullying. If you're someone who sees or feels like cyberbullying is going on, what is the best approach? Should you reach out to the victim, or perceived victim at hand, and just say, I understand that, kind of, hey, hang in there. I'm sorry to see that's happening, and just say, be a little solidarity? Do you confront the bully and perhaps escalate the situation, or not? What would be the approach of, you're just another social media member?
Yeah. I mean, again, for me personally, the most of the time, if I get any kind of personal attacks, I generally ignore it. I don't let it get to me at all, because, and I know you've had this, Eric. I know you've had trolls on your channel. I know you've had all sorts of crazy.
No, man, everybody loves me. You didn't know that?
You're the troll farmer. You've got you grow them, and so and generally, and because you've told me yourself, don't respond. Don't feed them, because if you do, then they will. Yeah, and I fell for it myself the once where I was having a real hypothetical conversation on some Facebook group going back many years. I'm not going to go into it, but I responded with a comment, and I made a reference to a particular weapon and ammunition, and I said, you can't get that weapon in that caliber. I said, yes, you can. No, you can't. I've fired them. Did it? And it went on and on and on and it was like kind of 2 hours later, I'm still arguing with this guy. I've given reference, shown pictures, everything, and I thought, what am I doing? I don't even know who this guy is, and I'm trying to prove. And it's those things, when those happen, you've got to stop yourself. You've got, and this is where my little phrase comes in that I've taught to Helen so frequently: not every action deserves a reaction. If you can get away with just deleting the comment, great. If you can get away with ignoring it, great. A lot of the time, again, they're only doing it because they're getting a rise out of you. This is a different thing to when somebody's doing this on your own social media, to when they're passing around, say, derogatory pictures or videos amongst groups.
Okay, well, that's
a different scenario.
That's getting that I kind of feel like maybe getting all the way into law enforcement territory, potentially, depending on the pictures or whatever. But interesting advice. I will say that there are occasions that I'll get a comment that is less than flattering, and it depends. Usually I ignore, but there are times that I'll deliberately say something snarky to a commenter, and it's not necessarily for the person making the comment. It's for everybody else reading the comment. It's sort of being inside on the joke. I don't know if that makes sense. But to flip back to it, in general, yes, I do tend to say, do not engage. I know I walk around, I have earbuds in all the time, and people like to hit me up for money, and I can't hear them, obviously. Whether they're on or not, it doesn't matter. I just kind of do that whole oblivious blonde, and I feel the same way. But again, to a person who feels victimized and trapped, then should you, like I said, be reaching out to them quietly and just saying that you're supporting them, and maybe telling them, hey, don't engage. It's a problem. They're an idiot. They're stupid. They're wrong. They're horrible. And validate how they feel. So maybe that helps them, or helps gird them.
In some instances, yes. However, just be very aware that whatever you do on the internet, it's not private. Okay,
Oh yes,
so
yeah.
if you know, so if a peer sends a message saying, like, this guy's a douche, don't engage, blah blah blah. Remember that that message can be screenshot
Sure.
and then put in a reply to the comment that's been made, and then what you've done is you've blown up the whole thing even more. So whereas obviously, again, this goes back to a very very similar system of approach a peer
Mhm.
and and say, look, I'm not going to comment, I'm not going to engage, but if you could possibly just say, dude, you're looking a bit weak. You're doing this thing again
Okay.
where you're picking, and so you've got the same kind of concept of with the physical and the verbal bullying. Do exactly the same thing. Get somebody else online, and again, don't go down the road of getting somebody else to attack them. Go down the road of getting somebody to highlight what they're doing in a way that almost embarrasses them. Not to the point where they're going to start then attacking back or retaliating, but just in a way the way you're saying, look, what you're doing is being observed here, and people are going to look at this as a bit wrong. Maybe you should find another hobby, and go down that route. That will be the most sensible one. Because once you start getting loads and loads of people going, leave him alone and or leave her alone and don't
Mhm.
mess with her, that's when it turns into a really nasty kind of battle, as it were, an online battle.
Okay. Well, now Ziggy did comment again
Mhm.
in this that I guess the significant other of her best friend, and I mean her best friend, I think of over 40 years, just
Mhm.
passed away last week. Last week was a really kind of a terrible time for
Yeah.
some of us. Um, is bullying the whole family, including Ziggy, and threatening to keep her and I guess others from the funeral, calling and harassing her. I don't know if that. I don't know how do you deal with that kind of a situation because obviously Ziggy, this is her friend
Mhm.
and she just wants to pay respects to her friend for God's
Yeah.
sake. Is that actually worth just going in, hopefully having a friend with her or whatever, and just show up and force the issue to where they have to say something or not? What would you
That
recommend?
this is a really difficult one because see, my answer if I was me, I would just, but this is me personally, I would
Mhm,
just go because it'd be a case of, look, she's my friend. I know you're a family, but she's still my friend. Whether you liked me or not is irrelevant. She did,
mhm,
and I liked her, and I'm here to pay my respects for her. I'm not here for you. I'm here for her. If you've got a problem with that, then deal with it after the funeral. At the minute, I'm here to pay my respects for and that's where I would be with it. But not everybody is as ballsy as me when it comes down to those things, and some people just don't like confrontation.
mhm.
So it really does depend on how you can handle it. It is something that, again, you could possibly get a third party to approach them and just say, look, is there any chance just for the day of the funeral you can just put all your biases aside, all your differences aside for the sake of the person's whose funeral it is, and then you can reset to your default afterwards. Without knowing a lot more about it, I wouldn't like to say what would definitely work or not. But like I say, I'd go straight in there because I just don't care. If it's somebody I loved, and they had, I was lifelong friends with, if it upset their family, then it upset their family. You know, so it's not like you're going to go at the away at the end of the day thinking, well, gosh, they're never going to talk to me again. They're never going to talk to
Good.
you. Exactly. They're never going to talk to you again anyway, are they? Really? So let's face it.
Okay. That is a hard one, and this is probably a terrible way to put it, folks. But Gavin's channel is growing right now, and we're getting really close to a magical number of 1,000 subs. We're at 965.
Go ahead.
If you haven't subbed yet, please consider doing it. Gavin has all kinds of great material, body language, everything else, and it would help him a great deal to get over that hump. So please consider doing it. And by the way, if you haven't hit like yet, please
Hmm.
do, because
And also share
that
this
does
video
help.
for, yeah, share this video for anybody who's going to be helpful with as well. Um, I've got a quick story to share about a guy at my school called Matthew many years ago. Um, he went through about a week of hell and was never bullied for the rest of the entire duration of his school life.
Hmm.
And so basically, and I apologise for the use of the word, but it all started over somebody calling him a pussy.
Hmm.
And no, sorry, it was Matthew who called them a pussy.
Hmm.
And they smacked him and said, "Don't you dare call me that, you went pussy."
So
and
he sort of asked for it. It
yeah,
sounds
oh
like.
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
It was deliberately done, and they kept whacking him, and he kept saying "pussy," and they were like, "Don't say that," And the more they told him, "Don't say that, don't do it," and whatever else, the more he kind of said it, and the more he wasn't bothered, and the more he was unfazed, and he wasn't a small guy, but he wasn't a fighter. He never fought back.
mhm.
And he got pushed down the stairs and he got kicked and he got beaten, he got whacked and everything else. But people or the people involved basically learned they just couldn't hurt him. They just, and even if they did hurt him, he wasn't going to stop. And they literally gave up. He went through a week of kind of hell. And I remember I
I
was,
would say, by the way, this is kind of the "in case of fire, break glass" answer.
oh yeah, I'm
I
not
mean,
recommending this.
I would see
Yeah.
the verbal repartee is a little bit better. I mean, to most people don't feel comfortable putting themselves
Yeah.
through
No,
being beaten
yeah.
every damn day until they get so tired. It's like, oh my god, my arms hurt. I've been beating them so long that I'm worn out. It's not
Yeah,
always the best approach.
I'm not recommending this as a method, but what I am saying, it was actually, I don't know whether he knew what he'd got in mind when he started all of this. But basically, like I said, I remember coming down the stairs to art class the one day, and he was coming up the other way, and he called my friend Peter a name, and Peter just walked past him, and I said, "Are you going to let him get away with that?" He says, "Yeah," and I said, "How come?" And he said, "Because basically, there's nothing you can do to this guy." And that was his reputation throughout the rest of school. So yeah, he went through probably a Monday to Friday of absolute hell. I mean, I'm talking real hell for this guy. Like I say, he was pushed down the stairs, he was kicked, he was beaten, he had stuff thrown at him, you name it, because he didn't and couldn't fight back. But yeah, by the end of that week, he got the reputation of the fact that you just couldn't touch him, you couldn't hurt him, you couldn't do anything to him, and nothing was going to make him stop or give up. And that was it. Nobody for the rest of school touched him ever.
It sounds one step short of anybody who's seen Little Shop of Horrors, the version of Steve Martin as a dentist and Bill Murray as the patient. He was like, "Oh yeah, give it to me."
Yeah. So, and like I say, I'm not recommending that as a method, or at least not physically. But the same concept applies to the fact that by the time that week had passed and people realized that he wasn't breakable, um, they'd literally given up. So if it is the verbal side of this and somebody is giving you verbal abuse, once they realize that they cannot break you because you're just going to look at them and go, "Is that all you got? Really? I can come up with better insults myself." And of course, it wears off, and they do kind of go, "It's not worth it."
Okay, so let's go in a more safe aspect of it. I could see where maybe that's effective on the cyber front
Mhm.
if you're getting attacked or whatever. Would that be something you recommend that somebody could do if they're willing to really stick to it? Like, if somebody attacks you, you not only take it, but you literally broadcast it and be like, "Look at this moron here.
Yeah.
Look what they're saying. Like, this is going to bother me. Look, everybody, hey,
Yeah.
stupid here is making fun of me."
That's it. The whole name and shame thing. It possibly could, and it depends what kind of a position you are in on the internet and whether you've got a lot of reach. I mean, you've had instances with particular people in the past that they've got pretty impactful crowd.
Mhm.
And of course, if you're in a position where you can do that and you can blast this guy's or person's face everywhere, and you can say, "Look what this guy is doing," and it is going to then make them go, "Hell, I'm not going to take that on again. That was too much." then great. If on the other hand you've only got a small following and you don't have that much reach and you're not going to get that much impact from doing that, it's probably not worth it.
Okay, well, what about using your other method of early on where you're recruiting people around? Now, by this I mean, Joe Blow says something nasty to you, but Joe Blow happens to follow Steve Smith. Steve Smith's super popular. It doesn't make sense, you as a non-entity or whatever, that when Joe Blow is trashing you, that you're amplifying it. And by the way, maybe tagging Steve Smith and saying, hey, Steve Smith, your buddy, is this something you believe in? It's something you do, and make sure that they know that you're amplifying whatever they do to people who are of quality or who have influence. Is that possibly a good method?
Yeah, I think that's an absolutely fantastic method. Like you say, you've got this kind of Joe Blow character who's going to come along and kind of start trashing you. If this Steve Smith, if he's got an image to uphold and he's got a good, clean image, he's got a good following and people are liking him, and he's going to end up getting dragged down, he's going to want to cut that out immediately. So if you are tagging him in a kind of response, say, hey, Steve Smith, what would you say to something like this? I look up to you, and kind of many other people do. Have you seen what this guy said? And he's a friend of yours. Really, how would you respond? And that in itself, even if you don't get Steve Smith himself to respond, you've got the effect of having that tag and all Steve Smith's followers being able to see this, kind of response or attack on you. And that I think, and you're probably in a better position to answer this than me, because like I say, I know you had I'm not going to say the name purely because of the fact that I don't want to give him any recognition, but you had a run-in with somebody, didn't you, online? And it became
I've had many run-ins, but
yeah, I know. You attract them.
Thank you. They're like, Gavin Stone, you son of a bitch. Yeah, that's what it is, obviously. I mean, real quickly, somebody said in the chat, Randy H, and I think it's a good point. This is reaching way back, but it's a great comment. If you report it to the police, make sure they write a report.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. There are instances where sometimes the police will turn around and say, look, let me just go and have a word with them and see if we can neutralize it without making a case. It can be effective, but at the same time, if there's nothing on paper, you've got nothing to back up what's been done. Get as much of a record of everything. And this also goes with your cyberbullying and everything else. No matter what, whether they're sending you messages, whether it's comments, whether it's pictures, and screenshot as much of it as you possibly can. Keep as much in the way of records as you can, and also remember that when you're responding, your responses are equally as much evidence as what their comments are. So, don't be saying anything that will then later cause people to look at your response as being just as bad, and people go, they're both as bad as each other. So keep as much evidence, keep that record, and that way at least you can produce it, whether it's police, whether it's court of law, or even if it's just something like the local media or newspaper or something where you can say, look, this is what's happening to me, and build a case against somebody.
Because, speaking of that, and I'll name the person.
Go for it. I didn't want to because it's not my.
No. Well, I mean, there's this guy, Christopher Boozy. And I confession through projection, the guy runs a site called Bot Sentinel, which is supposedly to prevent cyberbullying and things like that against celebrities and whatnot. Now, he has a habit of saying nasty things. Like he would say something nasty to you about Helen or whatever it would be, right? Which is going to raise your back up and you're going to snap a response to him. Now, he does all this on Twitter, and his methodology says really nasty comment. You respond, he deletes the initial tweet. And then he reports you for harassing him.
This goes back to your cry bully thing, doesn't it?
But this one's even further in a sense. There is the cry bully who may instigate or just flat out lie. But I could sort of see that. How do you cope or deal with an individual who pulls dirty tactics such as that, which I do consider to be bullying. He
Yeah.
goes, he picks on you and then he deletes it. He's using a bigger platform to harm you. How do you cope with that?
Yeah, I mean that in itself. This is why I mentioned about getting screenshots before you do anything. From the very start, get as much in the way of screenshots as you can before you've responded, after you've responded, after he's deleted his comment, the whole thing, because you've then got evidence. Because that is a typical case of something where conversations can be manipulated, things can be kind of redacted, parts of conversations can be used. We know this, we've seen it happen in the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial. Remember, a clip, can be as damaging as a conversation. So, so you need the whole thing and as much of it sequentially as you can, not just, one.
Should you, on that note then,
Mhm.
should you screenshot the tweet? Like, okay, somebody just said something nasty about you or whatever, and you're like, no, I don't care. I'm not going to be a nice person. I am going to respond. Should you screenshot that message,
Yeah.
then put it in your message and say, just in case they delete it, here is my response to this.
Yeah.
And then, tag anybody and everybody that's involved and have that record at the same time as your response. Would you advise doing that?
Definitely. So like I say, screenshot it before you reply, so you can
Right.
show you so
As
you
part
can,
of the reply.
yeah,
So it's literally in the message, like
that's
this
it.
to this.
Screenshot it before, as you reply, and after you reply, so you can see, the whole process. And if they reply again, or if they delete it, screenshot it again. Every single action that happens, get as much in the way of screenshots as you can. That's my advice personally. Save it and back it up.
Now, is this my opinion is this, but correct me if I'm wrong, is the idea of this to be too much of a pain in their ass to bother?
The screenshot side of it is more for your records, so that you can show evidence.
Okay, well, I didn't know if it was also to send a signal to them, I'm onto you in your game.
Mm-hmm.
Don't F with me.
Yeah. Oh, you can send these
I'm
to them in a
collecting
private
evidence.
message. Yeah.
Well, because you are replying to them with a screenshot, so they kind of will see it. So is that literally a signal? It's kind of like the punchback or whatever. Don't F with me.
Yeah. Basically, you're letting them know with those screenshots. Look, everything that's happening is being recorded. And if you have to, like I say, send them all to the person, saying, look, I've got everything here. This is not just, randomly taking screenshots. I'm saving these. I'm keeping these. So should this escalate, this is all going to come out, and let them know that that's your intention, and that way then it's going to be one of them things where you're no longer a soft target, and they're going to go, like you say, Eric, too much trouble.
Or mad, mutually
Yeah.
assured destruction.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to neglect, because I advertised this before we put it out. I didn't get the full answer from you on the autism question that came from locals. I think somebody else might have emailed that I forwarded to you. I don't know if anybody else has done that. So can we address some of those? And by the way, anybody in the chat, if you will, I know you might have already asked a question, but we've been kind of trying to keep the flow going.
Mm-hmm.
Can you ask the question again and just literally mark, with a Q or the word question, to flag that you're not talking to one another? It's like, no, we explicitly have this question.
Yes, please,
and we can just start addressing those for like the next, I don't know, 30 minutes or so.
Yeah. So I'm not an expert in autism at all. I know very little about it. So I'm not going to pretend to be. But what I will say is if that an individual is in a position where they are not as capable of defending themselves as others, then this will be a time where I would definitely look at going up the chain. I would definitely, rather than trying to do what I've said to do for most people, where it's just to like kind of not respond, not let them see a reaction. It's going to be very difficult. So therefore, then I would, in that instance, I would then go to both parents and teacher at the same time. And this is where I would let them both know simultaneously, this is what's happening.
You know what,
Okay.
Lori McIntosh, Karen's here in the chat, or Karen's. I apologize. How I don't know how to say the last name. That's a really good point. If you could pull that up,
Hmm.
uh, about Gavin. Okay, I just thought about something here, and maybe this is you can relate to this as military, right? What if you assign the welfare of the victim to the bully? As in, if they stub their toe, it's on you. If they trip, it's on you. Kind of like
Yeah.
in basic training, where if
Your
you
body up.
screw up, everybody does push-ups.
Hmm.
Is that something that could be potentially effective, and also force them to establish a relationship and maybe get to know their victim as more of a human
Hmm.
versus a ploy?
Definitely, I would, if it's done properly, if it's executed correctly, that kind of buddy system can definitely have a positive impact and work. Especially if, like you say, if they stub a toe, they're held accountable. But it's got to be more carrot than stick.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not kind of like, they've stubbed their toe, so you're going to detention for 3 times this week, or so if the welfare of the bully, of the person being bullied, is left in the case of the bully, then yes, it can be something that can be really, really effective. Again, if you've got a group of people, and this is something where they're doing it for appearances, maybe not so, but definitely a fantastic way of dealing with it if it's executed properly.
Well, and also, isn't the bullying about building their own ego or feelings? So, in
Mhm.
a odd way, you're feeding into that same desire by saying, "You're the big, strong person. You
Exactly.
are
Yeah.
the protector and defender and responsible one,"
Hmm.
to help build them up. And so, it's not actually taking them down. That would
Hmm.
be the carrot, or am I
Yeah.
misinterpreting?
Yeah, definitely, and of course, with that, you have got the fact that you are inflating their ego, and if you do give them the recognition, and it does need to be reasonably frequent, that well done, you're looking after this guy now, you're the big man kind of thing. Then it definitely does have that kind of carrot effect, as it were. So we've got a couple to catch up with here. So
Yeah, Michelle Sutton here. Perfect.
yeah.
Yep.
Colleagues and bosses who are bullies in the workplace. Right. So, yeah, we did say we'd cover this as well, didn't we? So, again, without splitting things too much, there is a big difference between male and female, and even other situations, but primarily male and female. Females are actually more likely to get bullied than males, funnily enough. That's,
That well, more likely to get bullied by other females too,
yeah. Yeah.
which is and chat, correct me if I'm wrong. It's not just that they're more likely to be bullied; they're more likely to be bullied by females. So
Mhm.
how do they deal with that?
Yeah, so that is something that is really, really, because females can be vicious. I mean, kids are bad, but females, um,
Hey, now,
they
okay, let's. And well, it was 21 watching. Now we're down to 3. Good job.
yeah.
No.
So no, where I'm going with this is, you've got, males and females are very, very different. We will, funnily enough, Parry came on earlier and he said, I just joined at the point where Eric was calling Gavin a dickhead or something. I can't remember what you
No,
said.
yeah,
And,
that could
and,
have been any point. I'm confused.
yeah,
When
that
was
could
that?
have been lost. So, and he said, so I don't know what's going on, but I'm liking it so far. And this is what blokes do. I'll say, "Oh, Eric, you're a cock," and you'll say, "Oh, well, Gavin, you're a dick," and because this is what blokes do. But then afterwards, we'll finish our broadcast, and I'll turn around to my wife and I'll say, "Eric's the man. He's brilliant." Whereas with women, it tends to be the other way around. They'll say, "Oh, you look lovely, you look wonderful," then she'll go away, and they'll go, "Do you see the state of her shoes? Do you see her head?" Yeah, and so it's a very different kind of setup with women.
Mhm.
So, but when it comes down to the bullying, I would probably have to go case by case with that. Is it somebody that is being bullied and belittled when they are present or when they are not present? Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah. So if you're present, again, the same rule applies. Don't let it see that they're getting to you, and more importantly, spin it. So if it's a boss versus worker scenario, and the boss has been picking on this particular lady and everything that she's doing, rather than standing there going, yeah, 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 and freaking out because you're getting told that everything you're doing is wrong, you know, play to the ego of the boss and say, okay, all right, I need to learn how to do this properly. I'm obviously not doing it right. Can you show me, what would you do in this situation?
Mhm.
And play to the ego of the person who's doing the yelling at you or whatever the case may be. So, you know, if you've got a female boss working with a female worker, and the boss is coming over and say, you haven't done this right, I've shown you 100 times. Say, look, I'm really sorry. Thank you for being patient with me with this. You know, don't turn around and say anything negative. Say, look, thank you for being patient with me with this. Can you show me again? I really need to get this right. You know, and that would be the way I would approach it in that instance.
And by the way, to follow up further about the females who can't be almost worse than males, some of this could be the environment that they're put in, sometimes driven by males, where they feel like they have to attack or put somebody down. So, what can we do to help control the overall environment to discourage any kind of that behavior without obnoxious on the nose stuff of, do you feel sad? No motivational posters. I'm talking about
Yeah.
actual actions.
Well, I've noticed. Because humans are naturally competitive.
Mhm.
And over the years, I've worked in lots of different environments, lots of different scenarios. In fact, that's my speciality. At one point, I was doing TDYs for different organizations around the world. So I'd be in some places as little as a day or a couple of weeks. And what I tend to notice, if you've got an enclosed environment, whether it's male, female, or mixed, there generally tends to be one person that is the everybody point and laugh. You know, it's
Mm.
Bob's fault. Bob, you know, it's a blame it on Bob scenario all the time. And then what will happen is if Bob ever leaves or is sacked, or they get rid of Bob and he's outcast from the community, somebody else takes his place.
Mhm.
And then it's Dave's fault. Everything's Dave's fault, and or whatever the case may be. So what you've got to do is because of that natural human desire to be competitive, and by being competitive, they want to be ahead, and they want to be they want to pick on somebody, even if it's in their own group. Is focus it outside the group. So there are
Mhm.
two rival companies. I'm not going to say what they are, but I've actually consulted for both of them. Very, 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 very big companies.
Mhm.
And the one company is they are constantly looking at
So
their
you did the
product.
Anheuser-Busch stuff.
Sorry?
So you told Anheuser-Busch.
No. So yeah, I'll just say Corporation A for the minute. They concentrate on their product and how they can make it better, and how they can please the customer, and how they can do so much more to improve themselves. And Corporation B are fixated on sticking it up to Corporation A. And do you know which corporation always does better? Corporation A, because they are not in that competitive mindset of, we got to do this to make Corporation A go. How did they do that?
Mhm.
They're busy concentrating on being better and not beating the competition.
Well, that's the same theory as don't vote against someone, always vote for someone.
Yeah, exactly. So this is what you've got to do with your, so say you've got a setting where, I don't know, it's a doctor's surgery, and you've got a team of 6 women or something that are on the running the practice, and rather than having 5 of them picking on one, that's internal. Perhaps have their focus external and say, we want to be better than this surgery. We want to be better than we want to get to the top of the list of being the surgery to where people want to be, or the practice where people want to come to. And that's where I would look at trying to, rather than going down the kind of, oh, everybody smile and hug and have a green tea together.
Okay, I think Perry. I don't know if there's a
Yeah,
question
I've
before.
missed a couple of questions. Let me see if I can go up. If I get these in the wrong order, I'm sorry.
Well, you talked about the boss. You kind of talked about the boss for Danny because there was a previous question about colleagues and boss, so that sort of went
Mhm.
together. Um, I think, yeah, I think that Perry is the most recent with a long. Can you guys please clarify and differentiate between environments and behavior indicators which indicate malicious bullying as opposed to a roast culture, which may go too far on occasion?
Mhm.
Um, that's I think that's a great point
It
because
really is.
it's hard to know. It's kind of like everybody's laughing. It's like, no, really, I don't like you,
Yeah.
or whatever.
And this is, I mean, I actually, I've got to admit, I'm guilty because I actually saw a meme on Facebook not so long back which read, "Remember, kids, it's not workplace bullying if you call it banter," or something along those lines. And I was like,
Mm-mm.
kind of, and of course, it was one of the things where I sniggered at it, but I thought actually that that's really wrong because there is this really, really, really difficult kind of um grey area of where the border is between when something is banter and when it becomes bullying. And for me, the way I see it is it's quite simple. If everybody's laughing except the person it's aimed at, then it's not banter.
Yeah,
That's it.
it's similar. It's not completely dissimilar to what I had described before about boozy, in the
Mhm.
sense there are people who will go thrash you up and down. You're like, what? Gavin, I'm joking, dude. Can't you take a joke? And then you just keep at it and at it and at it and at it. And they know. So there are sometimes when they accidentally go too far. And what
Yeah.
you said is great. How do you deal with the person, though, who uses weaponized humor?
Mhm.
And every time you point out, hey, this is hurtful, and they're like, Jesus, man, I'm joking. What's your
Mhm.
problem?
Again, I'd approach that with something like, well, one problem is you obviously haven't learned that I don't like you doing this. You know, so if you want to tell jokes, tell them at somebody else's expense or your own expense. But I don't like this, so please stop doing it. Because it's and I'm going along the adults thing here now, and not we're not talking about like the kind of children and school children. I'm talking
Mm-mm.
about like a group of adults together. It's by rights we live in an age where you should be able to, for the majority of time, approach people and say, "Come on, what's your problem? You've done this several times. I've told you I don't like it. Please stop it." And if they are doing it and they are continuing to do it, then call them out on it in front of a big group of people. The
Mm.
ones that they are trying to impress by doing their banter and their kind of their malicious humor. That's what I do. So this is where your whole equal treatment comes in. If everybody in the group is getting the same thing, then you need to find out if everybody in the group feels the same way you do.
Got it. Yeah.
Because if everybody in the group is kind of like, oh shit, now it's my turn to get picked on, and then it's his turn to get bullied, and and the only person who's laughing is the person who's dishing out the jokes, then it needs to be a thing where the group come
Then
together
you
and
had
say,
the
look,
plot line of The Office, right?
yeah, I've never watched The Office, so I'm sorry,
Yeah,
but
yeah, kind of. When you have the boss, because that is not uncommon, where you have the boss who is the wittiest guy or female in the room, and everybody's having to. At that point, do you just have solidarity with each other and hope, or what do you do?
so I mean, again, for me. And John Johnson's just hit on something here, which is kind of with the first line there, where it says the sensitive people having an agenda. We are living in a day and age where um, the smallest of things can be considered offensive now, and
Mhm.
you've got to be really, really careful with who and what you say to. So I would assess each situation dynamically. Obviously, if this is your boss, then yeah, stand in solidarity with all of your kind of workmates and say, look, what we're going to do about this. We don't like this. But at the end of the day, the boss is the boss. It's one of those things where you've got to make the right decision. Is it worth losing your job because you don't like the fact that he's cracking some jokes, or is it worth looking into getting training in resilience?
Okay.
Because it goes back to the very beginning about when we talked about not letting people see that they're getting a rise out of you. At the same time, that in itself requires a degree of resilience. You can hear the words, but it's what you do with them that makes the difference. It's whether you take them to heart or whether you go, that doesn't really affect me, so carry on. And there is a brilliant website, and I forgot the name of it. And it's something, I think it's called something like resiliencetraining.com. And there's also a great YouTube on it of a guy who I'll see if I can find the link and I'll put it in the description. Actually, it's probably the best thing in the world. It's rejection training and resilience training, and it's an Asian guy who went out for 100 days to get rejected every single day.
Yeah.
It was brilliant. And I'm not gonna spoil it with the results, but they were outstanding.
Well, I guess the rejections hurt less the more frequently they come if you're ready for them.
That's
But
it. Exposure equals composure. It does really help. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that's not going to solve every single problem. I'm not saying that nasty words aren't going to hurt anymore. I'm just saying it will dilute it exponentially.
awesome. I've not seen any questions flying in. Did you cover the emails that came through? And
Right. I remember the email. So again, that was great, and that goes with kind of hand in hand with the kind of teaming them up in the buddy system.
can you describe what the email said?
Yeah. So with this email, I'll summarize it as much as I can. But it was about a great group of teachers that spotted a particular individual was being picked on, and in the end, what the teacher did, he called it out in the middle of a physical training session, and he said, right, okay, then come on, everybody, we're going to go and put some boxing gloves on these two kids. And he put the boxing gloves on the two kids, and they ended up having a monitored, controlled fight in the school. And in the end, the kid who was being bullied was starting to get the upper hand on the bully, and that was when he stopped the fight and he said, right, look, he can hold his own. You can see that, and while it's controlled, I've been able to stop it. If that hadn't have been, and it was elsewhere, it could have possibly worked out a lot worse. Leave each other alone and get on and be nice. Or so that roughly that was ish of where it was. I can't remember the exact details. And I think again, it can be a great system, but there are some kids out there who might not be able to hold their own. And you put some young little skinny kid in with a great big bruiser, that system's not going to work. But for that particular event, it did, and it did a great job.
Cool. All right. Well, dude, this is your show. You're in charge.
Yeah, I know. We're just over the hour. I noticed 1 or 2 people joined us late, so I'm really sorry about that. However, I would really, really love to hear other people's opinions on this. And the reason being, I'm going to start something here in the UK where I'm going to try and put some kind of a not really a campaign, but some kind of maybe a crash course together on dealing with it, where people can come along and learn and benefit and perhaps kind of help each other with experience to try and prevent bullying as much as possible. So if you've got any experience in kind of how bullying has been stopped for you, by you, or with you in the past, what you've seen and what's worked, what doesn't work, and anything you can that you can kind of contact me with. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, or put it in the comments on YouTube, anything like that. Please get in touch, because I would really like to be able to do something about this. It's an ongoing problem worldwide, not just in schools, not just in workplaces, sometimes in families, and I really think it needs to be addressed. And I really think that collectively we can probably do something about it if we can kind of come up with systems that do and don't work.
Yeah, and if you're watching the replay, comment.
Yeah, please do.
Comment on the video. And again, if you like this kind of thing, you probably should give them a subscription. Let's get them to 1,000, folks.
Come on, guys, we're so close. And if I'm over the 1,000, if you're watching the replay, subscribe anyway.
Get them to 2,000.
That's it. Why not? So, Eric, thank you so much for coming along and joining us tonight. And we've covered a lot. Maybe at some point, if we get the right responses, we'll do a part 2 if the demand's there for it. Would you like to come back and do it again?
Sure.
Brilliant. Right then. Thank you to everybody who joined us. Thank you to the new subscriptions, and we will see you again soon. Good night, all.